Please rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Bastian?
Here.
Councilman Stillner?
Here.
Vice Mayor Foley?
Here.
Mayor Burnett?
Here. And we have a quorum, which brings us all the way to overview of the Parks Bond Referendum process. Item number 4. Who is this familiar face?
Good evening, Council. Susan Voller, Parks and Recreation Director. Per the Council's request, we have Kristen Caborn here with GAI Consultings, and she's going to kind of run through the process with you on if we were to go out for a general obligation bond, what that entails, what the process is, and what the timeline would be for us to meet to make the 2024 election cycle. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Caborn.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Council. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm excited to be here for my first time in front of you in Port Orange, so thanks very much. I'm the Director of Park Planning at GAI. Much like Susan, I have a Parks and Recreation background, but have been on the private side now for 17 years doing parks planning for our local government clients across Florida. So I've been very fortunate to work with several local governments on their bond campaigns for the past couple of years. We've been very successful, and it's been fun. It was something that I got to learn a lot about and some of the highs and lows of it. So I've got...
Just do me a favor before
Yes.
you get too into it. Just say your name into the record so the clerk quits giving me a funny look.
Oh, funny look. Kristen Caborn. You want me to spell it? I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Okay, great. With GAI Consultants. So we have a little presentation tonight. Oh, do I control it? With just some general information, but mostly I'm here to answer your questions, talk you through the process, some of the pitfalls. We specialize in the public education component of it. One of the important things to remember as a government when you're looking at doing any kind of bond referendum and putting it on the ballot, you're not allowed to advocate. You're only allowed to educate. How much is this going to cost me? What are the projects going to be? But aside from that, we have found that it's a very scientific process. So we will start with the research phase, and the research phase will answer really what your number one question is. When is the best time to place it on the ballot? So I don't have the answer for that right now. We'll look at that when we get into research, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But my suspicion is it's either going to be the primary in March or the general in November. It likely will not be the August 2024 primary. We suspect that that will be the lower turnout. Higher voter turnout tends to be more favorable for bonds. And so when we get into the research phase, looking at presidential primary in March, that actually may end up being a higher turnout based on what's going on in the political parties and who the potential candidates are, and if there's going to be a lot more people who show up for that versus a general election that people may say is the president's predetermined.
Do you account for the fact that August 24 would be a city election? There's a mayoral race on that ballot.
Yes, and we'll test that during polling, but
Okay.
even still, the local elections don't tend to have higher voter turnout, even if the mayor's on the ballot. But yes, we'll look at it for sure. I'm just making the hypothesis right now that that's probably not going to be the expected higher voter turnout.
Okay.
But we'll let you know, because I don't know that for sure. We don't know that for sure yet.
Well, and turnout isn't, it's more about result.
Turnout is higher voter turnout tends to have a higher likelihood of a bond referendum passing.
Okay. So, and forgive me for interrupting.
No,
That's
please
the
do. That's
nature
what I'm
of-
here for.
That's the nature
Yeah,
of the workshop.
absolutely.
But, I mean, if there's a correlation between this type of initiative and higher turnout, then I get it. It's just, I just know that we're already going to have a city race in August. I don't want, I worry about the disconnect, but I also am looking for success.
Right, and those are all things. The polling process is actually really scientific, and that's why we recommend breaking it down into two phases, because the first phase is the research. That is where we do polling. That's where we do some focus groups. That's where we test potential ballot language, working with the city clerk and how the ballot language would actually be phrased. You've got 50 words, and it's very, very important to make sure you get the right language. So all of that will be determined through the research phase and what will set you up for the highest likelihood of success.
Okay.
Yep. So, and the second phase would be public education. So diving in a little bit more onto research, really there's a couple components to it. So there would be the public opinion poll. This is actually something that we hire out. It's a statistician who will do, it's a telephone poll. He accounts for cell phones, landlines, all of that. And it's generally about 22 questions. And this is the opportunity for us to talk to voters, find out what are the hot button issues for them, so we can craft our public education campaign. We'll see what the temperature is for people being able to support this. The city has some identified projects in your capital improvement plan that we would talk about with potential voters and see if those are appealing for them to self-tax themselves and to agree, you know, we're willing to pay a little bit more money on our property taxes to tax ourselves for these types of improvements. So this is the opportunity for us to ask, is this even worth it at this time? And actually, in our experience, most recently we did this for Seminole County right before COVID hit, and the results of our poll was, it's not the right time. We're probably going to be good, but let's give it another year or two and build a little bit more consensus, a little bit more public support for the Parks and Recreation projects that we're going to ask people to be willing to tax themselves to fund, and then go back, and then COVID hit. So Seminole County actually hasn't moved forward with their campaign, but that did give them the information to make the decision at the time that it wasn't the right time. So the benefit is y'all have a lot of time to think about it right now if we're looking at 2024, no matter what election it is. We also would look at focus groups, and there's two approaches to focus groups. One of them would be working with the Parks and Recreation Department and Susan to identify people to come and talk to us. They would be moderated and facilitated questions, answers, and discussions where, again, we would dive in deeper to people's attitudes and what the likelihood is that it would pass. We would turn around a report to the city, present to City Council, and give you all of the information so you can make an informed decision if this is worth it. The other opportunity would be to have paid focus groups. Again, this is something that we would run through, but it would give you more of a demographic correlation to the demographics of Port Orange. So that is something where people would be incentivized for participating, but we would match the demographics of the city. So that obviously catches more people, more diverse backgrounds, those types of things. Questions?
Just to touch on this particular part of the process. So we've obviously got an elected body here. We have a city staff, and we also have a great board of volunteers that's an advisory board that has a great finger on the pulse of the community. $45,000 to $60,000 seems like a lot of money. We wouldn't have you here tonight if we weren't incredibly confident that it is time to put this in front of the voters. So I guess in my mind, I've got to wrap my head around why do I want to spend that money in that way, because you know, every dollar's got to count, and I'd rather shift money.
Let me start first. That's not a proposal we have. So
Yeah.
No,
what we were trying to do is give you general information on when we needed to get started. We've worked with GAI and a couple of other things, and they've done some successful bonds. So they volunteered to come give you more depth than we probably could as staff. None of this has gotten to the point. What I was interested more from you is, do you want to go down that path? So we don't have any kind of solid proposal. This was, if you want to do the 2024 ballot, which is, it's generally been our conversation, we kind of know from Parks Board presentations what the priority parks are. If you put it on the ballot in 2024, generally you go to the bigger election with a bigger turnout. History shows those do better at getting approved. You have to then have it on the ballot. You have to basically, like a candidate, you've got to get yourself on that ballot and qualify at the same time you would for that. So backing up from that is when you what are the projects, how much do they cost, and how do you go out and gauge interest from it? So the question tonight was understanding that timeline. Do you want us to go on 2024 generally with the projects that the board has brought to us in the past? If so, do you want us to go to the level of using a consultant to do that level of public input, or would you rather it be done some other way? So that's more of what the question was in front of you is 2024 a definite go? You want us to go down that path, and then at what level do you want us to go at it? Do you want to go at it full-blown consultant approach where you've got focus groups and polling and all of that, or do you want to try a different approach? So all of these things raise your percentage chances of success, but it's a matter of our choice of how much money do you want to go into it with. So at that point, it's more for questions of what level do you want us to go, and is it 2024 that you want to do it? At least looking into it. I mean, it may be if we go down that path and they say that you just don't have public interest in it, you might not, but we would work backwards from a 2024 date if that's what you want us to do.
So my question is on that particular part in the process, which is optional, obviously, is that if you have a city staff and an elected body and your advisory board and everybody's already in agreement that this needs to get on the ballot so that the city can yay or nay, right? So if they're committed to that so that the residents can make that decision, is that how important is that part, I guess is what my question is.
So, and that's a great question. The poll and the early focus groups give you a higher percentage chance of success because you know how to target your messages and your public education. Castleberry, we passed Castleberry's Parks Bond $24 million in March of 2020 with no polling. We just did about 4 months of public education. We built a great website. People could go calculate based on they could go directly to Seminole County Property Appraiser's website, look up their assessed value after homestead and all that, and then they could enter it in the calculator and they could see exactly how much they'd be paying. We did a lot of public meetings. We showed up at a lot of festivals, and it passed. But it passed, of course, it was March 2020. Y'all remember that story. It passed, but it passed very narrowly. And we don't know if it passed narrowly because it was the beginning of COVID or if it was because, there was just a little bit of voter hesitancy. It was a high turnout election because that was the presidential preference primary. So we knew that we were going to target that election, and the city didn't want to spend the money on polling, and that's fine. And I'm here to kind of educate you on the process. I don't care if you poll or not. I'm just telling you it'll get you a better chance of success and how to target your message when you get to your public education campaign. Because again, you can't advocate, you can only educate.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot, actually.
To me, actually, it also, and this is what I want to hear about it, is it's not just a decision about how to, of course, polling is about how do we market this as a package. I also want to kind of get an idea of, and this is where the focus groups might help, is what we're asking for. Is it too big? Is it too small? People right now are still paying, I looked it up, I'm paying $31 a year for the 2000, I think it was originally 2007. We got a brand new police station and a brand new fire station, improvement to others, and it did an awful lot. And for roughly $30 a year, I think it's a terrific value, and voters obviously supported at the time. Something like this, what's it going to cost? If it's too small or too big, it's what do we want to include in it? If it's just about parks and fields, or do we include the potential for a new community center on the west side? Some of those things that help us decide. And then when we take a look at it and we approximate, what's it going to cost somebody? Is it going to cost our taxpayers $10 a year, or is it going to cost them $40 a year? What's their risk tolerance for that? That's where I think where the focus groups might come in. I'm not really worried about polling. What I want to do, me personally, is see that we get this project list right. Get it in a package. Let's figure out what it will cost, and is it affordable to people? And I think that that's where polling would necessarily help, not just to see whether it'll pass or fail or this or that. Because I tell you what, if it's a good package and we can talk, we can market it, and that's not a problem to me. we're all capable. You know, we've got 30 years of experience up here between the four of us on this council. We can go market anything. And that's just a matter of getting the message out about what we're doing. It's not being inventive or anything like that. But to me, I think where I want to at least consider it is about getting what we're going to put on the ballot right, and as far as size and scope. I guess I just took the 5-minute approach for that last 10 seconds.
And polls are super expensive. It is the single most expensive part of this. And the reason why you get such a large range, and again, no proposal in place, these are just based on experience. A poll is going to be $22,000. That's the biggest, the biggest chunk, because you're paying for the statistic relevance of the sample, the random of the sample, the guaranteed numbers of responses, the guarantee that they match the demographics of Port Orange. And that's why we hire a company who specializes in election polling that anybody might use for a campaign. We've worked with them in the past. In Seminole County, they did a great job and helped Seminole County make the hard decision, not right now. Now, Seminole County had other things going on, and they had some other initiatives that were going to be renewed, and the school board was going to go out. Those are other things to consider if Volusia County schools are going to be going out. What are all the moving pieces around here that are also going to influence Port Orange voters? But by all means, the other big fluctuation in the cost is the focus groups. If we're going to do a paid incentivized focus group, that might be a trade-off from, instead of doing the polling, we're doing paid incentivized focus groups that are also more closely matched to the demographics of the community of Port Orange versus a list that Susan may generate with you all's help of people who are likely already potentially park advocates. So we try and be as unbiased to give you all the information you need to make an informed decision. And it's one of those things, the more research you do up front, you're essentially buying more of a likelihood of passage.
Kristen,
Yes.
really quick question for you. You just said match the demographics of Port Orange. Is that, so as far as calling, right, specifically, are these groups calling Port Orange residents, or they're calling residents and asking them theoretically if your town was doing this?
No, it is so sophisticated. They call like registered voters in Port Orange.
Okay.
So they will be registered voters. They'll already be
Targeted.
they'll already be pre-qualified that way.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just, when you said
It's a
it,
great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah,
Yes.
no gray area.
Yep.
I'm good. Thank you.
So those are really your choices: research phase, poll, no poll, focus groups, incentivized or open. And then looking, again, from there, you finish up research phase with a report, likely projects, likely wording of the ballot, likely messages that are going to help sell this thing. When that's done, your public education campaign, and keep in mind that everything has to be translated into certified Spanish, so it does slow things down a little bit when you get into public education campaign to make sure all of that's certified and everything meets the election requirements. But that's only 3 or 4 months, and it's again, that's kind of the fun part. That's going to festivals, talking to people, helping them understand what the issues are, helping them understand what they're buying, things like that.
And that's part of the package, and you can kind of...
That would be tailored based on the findings of the research phase. The public education is completely separate, and it's based on, okay, this is what we found, and we think this is going to be the best approach to get it passed.
I think the philosophical question up front is, we have hit a maturity point. The city is not growing near as fast as it was, but for a long time, up until about 10 years ago, it was growing a whole lot faster than the facilities that we offered. And me personally, it kind of sticks in me a little bit that we have all these baseball fields, and we've actually gone backwards in our offering of baseball because of demands on other services. I hate going backwards on anything. I'd rather find ways to add to what else we do. But these I don't see that demand for our parks and rec services abating. So I think looking forward to what are we going to be for the next 30 years is the next question. We have a wonderful facility out at Karasi, a multi-purpose fields out there, 4 multi-purpose baseball fields, a soccer field, a football stadium, and if you hold more than one event out there, parking is maxed out. We don't have enough. Just can't, you know.
Yeah.
So and you could do multiple things out there if you had a place to put people, and we don't. So it obviously calls for more out there. And if you do something out at Karasi, not just parking, are there other facilities that we had out there? We've talked. Our Parks and Rec Board has worked for a long time on a lot of different projects, and they have a shopping list of top 10 priorities they've already presented to us. Among those is, do we want a West Side Community Center? If so, where do we put it? What it would cost? What do we offer in it? So I think the philosophical question of is this something, you know, if these are something that we want to do, I personally think this is the best approach for it, because voters have the opportunity to say, is this the package and what's it going to cost me? And I can say yes or no, and they can decide for themselves what kind of city they want to be moving forward. So, I mean, do we have a consensus that we want to continue?
I don't think she's done with it.
I'm done.
Oh, you are done?
I
Oh,
think
okay.
so, yeah.
I saw more pages there and I didn't know.
No, this is,
I'm
no,
sure we
I'm.
didn't cut you off because we've been
Okay.
known to do that.
No. I've got more information kind of in note form that
Okay.
I made for myself,
What I want to do is
but
make sure before we talk about the how, I want to make sure that we are committed to do we want to move forward in investigating with this, yes or not?
Yes.
I'm seeing a big nod from Drew.
Yeah,
I'm seeing a
yeah.
big nod
It's
from
something
you.
we'll
I'm seeing
need help with,
So
for
we do
sure.
have that consensus, and I wanted to
Absolutely.
make sure that we displayed that publicly before we move forward. So the next question is actually multiple questions. We got about 150 questions about, okay, what do we want to put in this? Personally, I like to see this on the March 24 ballot, because sooner is better than later for me when it comes to getting things done. And the further out we push it, it means the further out we have to wait to make it happen. You know, it's just that's where me being part of government drives me nuts, because sooner is better than later, but government, we naturally work slow sometimes, and some of it is absolutely the constraints that we have on
Yeah.
ourselves, because we have to have a open and transparent process, and that open and transparent process takes more time. So
Just one thing on the timing, you guys can help me with this. So the November ballot or August would allow us to put this in the budget for the upcoming year, depending on what level you wanted, and start in earnest. I mean, Susan and the Parks Board would take their list and tighten up. We've got it in the capital improvements program. We have general estimates, but we could get a list of projects during the course of this year at staff, and then you'd have money in the budget in the fall. If you were to go to the spring, I think we would end up needing to move quicker than that to get through all this stuff. We would have to do a transfer from fund balance to do so. So tonight we were just giving you a process. If you
government moving a little faster.
if you
I
want to
like
do
that,
April,
Wayne. I like
we
that.
need some kind of future, John would have to show up at some future meeting to move money into the budget to do so. But it can be done. I just wanted to let you know that the only reason November gives you the biggest likelihood. If you'd rather do an earlier one, we're probably going to come behind you with a budget
If we
transfer.
can ascertain, and I think in this city, if we can ascertain that this is something that people want and it's not controversial, I'd prefer sooner than later. That's me. Now, if you're telling me that sooner than later is not going to be successful, moving money around, that's a procedural thing, and we can handle that. What I want is the most successful project that we can have as soon as we can get it, because quite frankly, we've been talking about some of these things, and our Parks and Rec Board has been working hard on some of these things for years. And if we can, is there anything that we can do to accelerate that process, I'm all for it.
So, if I could, into Wayne's question.
You may.
So, basically, the education part needs to start 3 months prior to when we do the voting. Okay, so if you want to go to March, we would need to start in January, which means we would need to do all of our research 6 months prior to that, which would start us probably in September of this year, to be honest. If you push it out, we probably could move to October, but we're still going to have to get all of our research done, and the research process being, what is the project list we want to put forward? How much is that project list, and does the research show us that it's too high, it's too low? Do we need to take a project off to be successful? Because I know we had a discussion with our Parks Advisory Board, and they have been fantastic, and they have a list.
Yes.
And, so is it that the cost of the list, or do we want to do 2 or 3 to bring it to a more manageable or, a better appetite for our residents? And that's something they will help us with to try and figure out. I agree. I think we all have a really good pulse on what our community wants and what they don't want, but we're also Parks and Rec enthusiasts in our advisory board. Like, we think it's the greatest thing ever. I think it's the greatest thing ever. But there may be somebody that lives, down the street from me is like, yeah, I don't think so. And so making sure we're successful with that, and that, we don't throw good money after bad, right? So that's what we're trying to educate you guys on, to let us know what you think you want us to do. Then we'll work with Wayne. We'll get the process started.
Well, I think the next step is, we need to come up with that list and what's it going to cost us no matter what. But there are a lot of elements to a March election that also favor us, because in January we typically do a town hall. Beginning of February, there's a mayor's breakfast at the Chamber of Commerce. Later in May, there is a State of the City. And these are things people show up to or pay attention to anyway that we can use to talk about this. If I'm talking about those things over those 3 events about something that's going to happen in November, it's kind of hard to get everybody excited about it and keep that momentum. I think that those things can play.
And our
Yeah,
large
just some
special
thoughts.
events are also a great place to do some
Absolutely.
education. So, from what I'm hearing tonight is that you guys want to look at going forward. We can bring back a schedule, and then maybe we'll see about scheduling time with our Parks Board to go over that list, and we'll kind of put a schedule together for the council to agree upon moving forward, and then we'll go in that direction. Wayne, are you okay with that?
Well, let's put it this way. I think the Parks Board's excited about
They're
it
here,
because
right?
they're here.
Yeah, I'm telling you, they're a great group of people to work with. So,
You better say that.
yeah, it's the truth. It's the truth.
Okay.
I would say that the one thing staff should keep in mind, because I know that as we have done a lot of projects over the years for different reasons, that, there's a lot of time in between meetings and things like that. I'm not looking for that for this. This is long overdue, in my opinion. And if we need to accelerate this with having more meetings on a more frequent basis, then we just do it.
I'm in.
Just do it.
Absolutely.
Because there is a timeline here, because if you don't meet the timeline, we're talking at least another 2 years, and we're way behind. So we can't afford another 2 years, because council chambers can't handle more overflowing of upset parents and kids, because we don't have space to provide the things and the services that we all want them to have. And so we
And Scott, if a parent asks you, are you doing the very best that you can do to do something about it, and you say, well, we're slowing the timeline down, is that a yes or a no?
So that would be my preference, that I think
Very good
there's
point.
probably consensus from not only us, but the advisory board, because I see them all nodding their heads. But, so just keep that in mind for staff, is that I know a lot of times you guys try to make sure there's plenty of stuff before you bring us all together or whatever. Well, this is an issue on its own. It's
And we have
extremely
momentum. Let's not break the momentum if we can help it, yeah.
It's extremely important to a lot of us. And so whatever we got to do to move that thing forward, and some of the timeline I get can be a little flexible here and there. But
Sure.
I do want to mention that with a enthusiastic Parks Advisory Board, that's going to be a huge help, especially in generating your list of projects. They'll be under the same restrictions that you all are under, that you can only educate, not advocate. However, if a friends group tend to magically appear, those are the friends group, the people who are not a quasi-judicial board appointed by an elected official. They can advocate all they want. So that's something to just
Oh, don't think that all the parents that haven't stood up here for the last 4 years on a public record to say who they are will be contacted to say, remember we told you this was coming.
Without a
Yes.
Now's your time.
Yeah.
Now's your time.
So you give them the information, the project list, how much it's going to cost, and let them run wild with it. Those can really be your
sure.
advocates on
For sure.
on successful projects. So
Okay.
We'll put this together for you and come back with a proposal on how we're going to handle that, because I think if you're going to go with the spring time, you probably do want to do a little bit more of the informing part of it, just to up your odds, because as you
Sure,
said, your November
absolutely.
election gives you a better chance. If you go with a different one, you want to succeed, and you want to succeed with non-parks enthusiasts, because you need their votes to get it done.
If you were to 1, 2, 3 them, as I understood, you think November's your best shot? Just glossy overview. March would be second, third would be August.
no, March, November, August.
So March would be best,
March
November
is best.
second best.
That's my guess, because I think that the presidential primary, and just talking with my partner in crime who does these with me, that was kind of our take, that just with the general politics going along with who's going to be the nominee out of each party, that there will be high turnout because people are going to want to vote for who they want to be their nominee in a presidential election. It it may not happen, but it tends to get more party line votes. So we need to.
If that's gonna be the highest turnout, most likely, then I'm all for whatever it takes to get this thing on that ballot.
And if y'all have, Susan, the 3 months prior, because people lose the message, Mr. Mayor, you were mentioning that
Absolutely.
people lose the message, and we try not to do heavy public input in the summer, and we try not to do heavy public input around the holidays. So if y'all have some holiday events, open, festivals, parades, tree lighting, whatever it may be, that might be a soft announcement. But then once January rolls around, that's where it would hit hardest.
I don't think that any of the four of us up here speak softly about anything.
And if you have time, Castleberry's website is still up. It's Go Parks 2020. Like I said, it passed in March, so the website content has changed over the past 2 years. But you can see they did exactly what y'all are talking about. They identified 6 projects. They identified it was going to be $24 million. We had some very nice renderings of some of the projects. It was a nice geographic distribution of projects across the city of Castleberry. So no matter where you lived, you had something that you could latch onto that was going to improve in your neighborhood. So that's the type of thing that we would look for. So if you went on Castleberry's website, you'd see the calculators still there, even though it doesn't really matter anymore. You'd see the list of projects. You'd see right now they're just using it to update it, but the campaign had a brand. The city developed the logo, but then we did all of the paraphernalia, all the marketing, mailings, and all that type of stuff for them. But we developed the website using their logo.
I see 3 speeds here, either fast, faster, or fastest.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much
Thanks
for
so
having
much.
me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming, Kristen. Anyone here want to speak to the item? There being none? Moving on, item 5, update on the rec center. Who might be speaking to that?
Good evening, Susan Valley Parks and Recreation Director. Just to kind of give you a quick update on where we are with the rec, progress is still very slow. However, we have passed another milestone. Actually, we passed on Thursday, which is we got the analog lines into the building in order for the state to come in and do the inspections on the elevators. That's one more thing we can cross off the list that helps us get into the building. It's really all the cabinetry came in. The flooring is mostly in. We have about 30% that's still left to do. We have some painting that's happening, but it's really shaping up. And we actually took a couple of our new staff people over there to see it because we see it every day, and we really wanted to kind of get their thoughts on it. And they walked in and they were like, "Wow," and so that made me feel a lot better because I see it every day. But it is coming along. The contractor is still in the LDs, and we're still keeping track of that. And as we get towards the end close out of the project, that will be significant. So that's kind of where we are.
What's our timeline?
So I'm going to say that
Sorry to jump to the
for
bottom
the
line, but-
information of that we know right now, we should be substantially complete by the end of March. And
Of
then
this year?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we'll have 30 days for there to get the closeout. We are working with our building department to try and get the West Addition a little earlier because we are trying to accommodate Art House so that they're not not doing classes for more than a month or two because they're significant to them to make sure they can get in there to do that. So we're working on some of those things. If not, we will be accommodating Art House in some of our locations to help them get their classes started. And then we'll move them back into the building when it's time. So that's kind of where we are. So we're hoping grand opening. I'm going to say in April, sometime in April.
Of this year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Writing that down.
So that's kind of where we are.
April 2023, underlining the 3.
Yeah, it's got to be.
I will be very happy as long as there is a grand opening and that facility is available for the public before school gets out.
Us too.
That would
April's
be
great.
Fantastic.
But
Yep.
before school gets out, because there's a lot that happens there
Yeah.
on that property during the summer.
And I can tell you, your city staff, not just me, not just my Parks and Rec people from building department, people from public works, people, up in community development. It's taking all of us to truly stay on top of this project. And they are there every day. There's people there making sure this is done, making sure that is done. And I can't tell you how humbling that is to see the city departments come together and really make something like this get going in a bad situation, trying to make it worse. So it is happening.
Oh, and while we all wanted to be in this thing a long time ago, it is probably more, well, not probably, it is more important that it's done right.
Yes.
'Cause we have seen projects in the past where cut the ribbon, it all looks great, and then month after month after month, we just find problem. So,
Yeah.
no, I'm with you.
Yeah.
On board with
So,
that.
Okay.
Council, any other questions?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I'll see you in April of this year. Item 6, fiscal year 2022-2023 first quarter financial report. Let's see if I can mess with John the same way I've messed with Susan.
Mayor, I brought backup. How are y'all doing this evening?
Good,
Good, sir.
As y'all are aware, we started coming to you back in October with quarterly financials. At that time, we said we wouldn't come back for September 30th because that's year end. It's kind of hard to do that, so we are coming to you today with the first quarter of fiscal year 23. This would be just a brief overview so that we can move on to some other items of importance. But as we are today under general fund revenues, when you look at this, as of 12/31, we've collected 40% of our budgeted revenues. That's attributed solely to ad valorem taxes. We received the bulk of that prior to December 31st. Conversely, when you look at expenditures, we're at 21% of budget. That has a lot to do with the fact that we have a lot of front-end expenditures related to debt or other such payments that are due the first of every fiscal year. I can tell you as you go through here and look, all of our general fund departments, per our monthly budget report, are well within where they should be at 25% at this portion of the fiscal year. Our special revenue funds, that's our federal police forfeiture, recreation impacts, all of our impact fees, our town center CRAs, Eastport CRAs. Typically speaking, those as well as a general fund, they don't tend to have all of their expenditures up front, but you will see that most of these are reimbursements from grants or other funding sources. But if you look at when you look at your town center CRA and Eastport CRA, you can also see from this that they've received the majority of their revenues because, again, that's all ad valorem based and they've received their TIF. When we get to the enterprise funds, we tend to fall a little bit behind on those in terms of revenue because we bill in arrears. So, October 1st, the fiscal year starts, but we wouldn't have billed for that consumption until November, and then that bill would not be due for payment until early part of December. Also recall we had 2 hurricanes this past year, so we also had, we extended delays
Yeah.
in, bill dates, shut-offs, et cetera, so that would have delayed some items as well. So just looking at our utilities, they've only collected 9% so far of their budgeted revenue, but we have no concern on that because, again, we're 30 days in arrear and we had some postponement of due dates. When we look at our internal service funds, same thing. Most of these we only bill quarterly, so as you can see from here, we haven't billed very much of the revenues yet because, again, it's in arrears. We do it at quarter end, and so we wouldn't have billed them until January, this month, for those services. So as we go to the mid-year review, you'll see that those expenditures will have caught up. Outstanding debt. So at the current 9/30/22, going into the current fiscal year, we had outstanding debt of a little under $37 million. Our budgeted principal and interest for the year is just over $5 million. And as you can see from this, just from the description, the majority of this debt is from our enterprise funds. And as we all know, we've been discussing this due to, we're at end of life of most of our debt issuance. So we've been seeing $3 and $4 million worth of debt fall off annually the past few years from our prior discussions.
You weren't around 10 years ago when this was a 6-figure number. Yeah.
And
We've come a long way.
Absolutely. And as a reminder, this past year we've had not only our financial advisors regarding our debt, but also our underwriters have all presented to you, based on our 5-year CIP, some potential debt issuances that we will be needing to do to complete projects within our water and sewer fund for much needed repair. So as y'all are aware, that's probably going to come back to everyone in the next 12 months. Okay, on our investments, we take this straight from, our financial advisors regarding cities' investments, PFM. So this comes right from their report. This is just an update. They haven't updated. This is, again, from September. The numbers are pretty accurate, but they haven't released their December 31st. We've already covered, where our U.S. economy is characterized. We currently have high inflation, deteriorating housing market. Federal Reserve has increased the interest rate, for borrowing money this past 2 years. So that has, resulted in, if your home mortgage is being issued, less cars or, toys, boats, RVs, etc. But as we go into this, we can see that if you recall, when Stephen Alexander spoke to Wayne and I, we do see that the U.S. Treasury yield curve will be flattening out, and within the next 4 to 5 years from today, we should see that the interest rate will go back and stabilize somewhere around 3.83%. The good news is, as you recall, last week y'all approved, the master lease agreement for the ambulance and the engine. You can see that the long year interest rate, remember they gave us an interest rate of 3.49% and 3.61. So when you look long term, we are still getting interest rates on debt issuance on 5 to 10 years out versus 1 to 2 years out. We currently have actively, as of December 31st, managed a little over $38 million. One of the things that we have spoken to them about is that we are reaching some of our investment policy maximums on some of our, where we invest our money with our local government investment pools. So we'll be looking at other local government investment pools to potentially maximize where we're allowed per our investment policy the monies of the city. This is just where we currently have the majority of our investments allocated. You can see within here, we fall well under our investment policy maximums. So going on to our historical pension market values. So this is just to show you that if we look at our 3 pension plans that the city has for police, fire, and general employees, you can see that we did have an uptick in all 3 plans from June 30th to December 31st. So we did stabilize, prior quarter losses. We're actually, seeing a rebound in our investment returns from all 3 plans. I know yesterday I'm on the General Employee Pension Board, and I can tell you that they gave us a pretty good review of our quarter end. So, very optimistic. Our net pension liability and employer required contribution hasn't changed. We start to have, the end of February, first part of March, our pension board meetings where we will be receiving the up-to-date actuarial study for all 3 plans. So the next time we meet, this slide will be updated.
So, okay, so it'll have the 2022
That's correct.
liability.
Yes,
numbers.
I'm still
Okay.
operating off of the numbers released October 1st of 2021.
Gotcha.
Those numbers come directly from the pension plan's actuarial statement.
Okay.
Okay. Then our next couple of slides, this is just for information. As we've, we have an upcoming budget amendment on the February 7th agenda, and this is just for everyone's information. These are new ask. So, these are items that have come to the city manager and my attention that require potential funding, or from the departments, especially as you go into your enterprise funds, where there are either additions or replacements due to the fact that what we currently have is either not adequate or we need additional. We have the required funding within the general fund and all other enterprise funds that have made the request. And I can also assure you that everything that was on this list, your budgeting team did get with all the departments to make sure that they were justified in the ask and relayed to the city manager. Okay. So then we get to our next item, which is the utility billing software. May of last year, I came before you guys, council, asking for $1.5 million for the new utility billing software. When we went to our current ERP solution, it was known, or it was relayed, that that was only core financials and not the overall, utility billing and other subsidiary modules. So as your IT manager, now your interim IT director, discussed possible solutions for it, and we went out. We did a road trip. We went to Kissimmee. We went to Kissimmee Utility Authority. We went to Boca. We looked at several softwares and versions of softwares. After that, when we received the price, we received a quote of $1.4 million for utility billing software. At that time, I went to the IT director and I simply said, is this our only solution? So then we went out there starting to look at other providers, specifically the providers that previously submitted when we changed ERPs. And we came and we evaluated and researched the alternatives, and we selected Tyler Technology. They offer a vertical solution that is a government ERP solution. It has significant staff reconciliation simplifications, and we have a far reduction on third-party AIs. We have well over close to 40 AIs in our modules with Workday, and it just every time there's a software update versus Workday or the other, it's constantly down. And right now we currently have 3 that are down that staff is working on. One thing that we recognize as staff is that we also went through, back in the last 4 years, cleaning up our processes. We went from paper-based to electronic, so everything that we have done with Workday, as we look at a different solution, would not be lost. Our primary focus when I came up to you last year was the fact that, you know, HTE for utility billing was our only module that we have not updated. Well, we've now received word this past week that we are into life, that they are no longer going to be supporting any future upgrades, or if there's potential problems, that they're moving that to another product. That is not a product that, you know, city staff, we feel would be adequate for us, because it still doesn't take us to the next level of technology. So between your staff, and you've got finance staff, HR staff, and IT staff, along with 30-something other city staff, we went through this and we looked at Tyler, and we believe that by switching to Tyler, it brings us more efficiencies because it's one platform versus many. It has a significant cost savings because once we went down this road and we were looking at the utility billing software that would integrate into Workday, it would not have a cash receipting module that could take payments across all platforms the city has. Plus, we still don't have the necessary budgeting software that city staff and council expects of us when we put together a budget. So with that said, by looking at the Tyler solution versus putting everything together for Workday, there's a cost difference of $1.7 million. So it's $2.8 million to implement the other modules that would work with Workday, or $980,000 one-time cost to implement Tyler. On top of that, because you're reducing the number of each separate software platforms that you have, you're looking at recurring annual fee reductions of an average of $430,000.
Say that again.
A reduction of annual recurring fees by going from many modules to one module, because it's one provider versus many provider.
What I'm taking away from that is that to save that amount of money means we're spending a ton of money right now on that.
We spend a lot of money with Workday, sir, and all the other required components of it.
Gotcha.
So just to add that one component, which is going to be obsolete here shortly, is 1.5, and but we can go get the entire Tyler system for how much?
$980,000 one-time fee. Again, it is a government.
900,000 above the 1.5.
No, sir. $980,000 total. So we have found a solution that council authorized us for $1.5 million. That's a Workday integrated product that we can go to an overall government complete ERP solution for a one-time cost of $980,000, which provides a complete financial management, human capital management, revenue management, data insight, enterprise, and citizen service. It is a complete package, all integrated into one, that their core focus is government. They provide no other software but to government. They are one of the largest government ERP solutions in this country. They have over 2,800 cities that they provide, and just within the state of Florida, it's over 100 municipalities. And if you look from here, one of the other key issues that we have is that when I hire a new staff member, most government solutions, and I've worked with a couple, if I wanted to have training on payroll, I could bring every payroll employee from every surrounding municipality, and we can have one training for everybody for 3 to 4 days, and it might cost us $35,000 to $5,000. If I want to have one person go to a Workday training, it's per person, and it's $1,500 to $3,500 per person.
Well, this isn't-
and I can't stack it.
This isn't the first time since I've been up here that I haven't heard a complaint from somebody about Workday not working. So, I mean, I've heard this from Wayne. We've talked about this in meetings, me and him one-on-one. I just want to make sure I understand. So we're going to save, $430,000 annual fees because we won't be paying that to Workday. Instead, we're doing a one-time thing. So we're paying less money now to go with, if we went this way,
Yes, sir.
we would pay less money now than we would have to pay just for this one addition to Workday. And we're going to cut the annual budget by over $400,000 every single year.
That's correct.
That's all I need to know. Okay. I just want to make sure I was understanding it correctly.
You're correct.
I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop it in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, where's the downside? Like,
Yeah, so there's quite a few people in
We
this
spent a
room
lot
that
of
have
money on
used
Workday, though.
this product, so this is not something new. I can tell you that we struggle all the time when we have new employees, and if we have a problem, like right now we have, if we have an issue, I've got to call, either Collaborative or Workday to get it. If I'm trying to do something new, I've got to hire Collaborative or Workday to do it. I can tell you when I did implemented direct deposit, emails. Hey, can you send me the screenshots on everything that you had in order to implement, direct deposit for payroll? Not a problem. I get the screenshots. I sit there and I have access to do it. That's not the way Workday is set up. It is set up for. So it is definitely a phenomenal product. It's just a very expensive product.
Well, we can face it too. I mean, we took a giant step forward as a city by going to the ERP in the first place.
Yep.
So going from non-ERP to ERP was a massive step. Now we're just talking about changing approaches, going from one to another instead of non to.
And another key thing to remember too is we're not losing anything that we have. That's item number one. Item number two is all softwares today are subscription based.
Sure.
Our current system we've had for 25 plus years, that even if HTE stops supporting it, it's still working on our server that we have sitting upstairs. As long as it works great, it's not going to stop running. It might not stop running, but if there is a problem, I can't get it fixed. My point to that is under today's software, I got to pay every month. If I stop paying, they sever service. I have no access to it. So, our contract with Workday ends December 23rd of this year. We want to extend it for 12 months, and Workday has stated to us that they will do that. And during that time, we want to move towards Tyler, and we would be able to phase in financials and HR by June of 24, and utility billing no later than December of 24. So it's a reasonable time frame. It's far longer than what we implemented Workday in. So making sure that staff has time to do it so that we're not, doing, too many things at one time. So by December of 31st, we would be in a solution that we know works for our existing utility meters, our water meters, and we know complies with all the requirements of the state of Florida. And not being in a vacuum, I've made sure that I've kept up with our auditor, so that, they're aware of everything that we're doing on it. Tyler's, we know we've had those conversations in the past, so this is definitely something that we have worked as a team to do, and it's not the finance director standing up here saying we have to do it.
And the fact that you have Zach in the audience for any reason at all, much less to endorse this decision, is pretty telling.
Yeah.
Quit smiling.
Yeah. And all your internal service, support staff are all in here too. So this is not something, again, that I'm up here wanting because that's what I want. It's not. It's something that will alleviate a lot of concerns moving forward and reduce some of our technical challenges.
John, can you put up the last slide there that shows all the municipalities around that are using this? I just want to make a quick comment. So I've been with the city one way or another since 1989, and I will tell you that this slide right here gives me a lot of comfort and confidence because I cannot tell you how many times the city or departments and the taxpayers have been sold, hey, this is the next great thing, and this is and our good friend Bob Ford used to sit up here and caution us about being on the bleeding edge of things, and we have had many times where we've gotten involved with software programs and the like, and then when there's an issue, we go, well, why is it such a big deal? Just call one of the cities in Volusia County that use the same thing, and we go, well, none of them use this, and we're like, what do you mean? well, yeah, there's actually 1 or 2 cities in Florida, they don't like it. And you find all this after the fact. And so this right here, actually, before I even saw this slide, was already a question I was gonna ask you, is tell me first who else is doing this? Because this is one of those things, this is a huge problem when this doesn't work, right? And this is a headache. Our phones blow up, your phones blow up, customer service phones are blowing up. And this is comforting to know that, hey, when there's an issue, we not only will have the resource of Tyler,
Collaborate with your neighbors.
but yeah, I can call Ormond Beach and go, hey, have you guys ever had this problem? How did you fix it? What did you do? Or you know, New Smyrna or what have you. So I just want to commend you for including this, and all staff should know in the future that this is important for me at least. I don't want to be on the bleeding edge of a lot of things, and I don't have to be on the cutting edge of a lot of things. I want to be on the what works. And you know, the cost part of it, that's all important, and I appreciate you giving us all those numbers, saving money, spending money, and all that. But for me, first and foremost is it gonna work? Is it gonna do what we need it to do? And when it's not doing that, how quickly can we get on top of it and resolve them and fix them? And so I appreciate you putting this in
Well,
there.
I'll take this
is
one
really
step
important.
further. Back in 2009 or 10, when I, was, as y'all know, I was finance director for Edgewater for 10 years. And my entire customer service staff fell ill and was out of work for about 2 weeks, was it? Your Port Orange staff came to Edgewater every night for 2 weeks and did my utility billing. That's another huge benefit to that when I had no staff that could do it because everyone was ill.
Yeah.
I could rely on people that would come up and, we pay them obviously, at the time, but, that's another huge benefit to that, so that, when things happen,
Good to know.
I have resources. And there is no other city in this state that is anywhere like us that has Workday.
Yep.
Gainesville, Orlando,
All right, I find that surprising.
Largo, Sarasota. That's it.
Okay, we're sold. We're sold.
Okay. Final thing, American Rescue Plan.
Item 7, the American Rescue Plan update. Who's speaking to this, Wayne?
Linda is.
All right.
So as y'all recall, 2021, we received just under $10 million. We followed under initial rule for almost a year. Then in March of 2022, the U.S. Department of the Treasury adopted the final rule, which clarified some of the language. And the simple thing of it is that we can use up to $10 million for governmental services. So the reason why we're bringing this to you, here are the projects that you have already authorized staff to proceed with utilizing the ARPA funds. What our ask is that with all of the new regulations regarding Buy America, Build America, other requirements that are already existing like Davis-Bacon, the requirement for federal funds to have CEI, construction, engineering, and inspection, on top of the engineers that are already, designing the project, et cetera. That is going to add anywhere between 15 and 20% to a project by utilizing federal funds. So where Zach and I have been discussing, and we've relayed to the city manager, is that we still want to complete the project. Every one of these projects that you have already authorized. What we're asking is that instead of spending the money specifically from ARPA on those projects, we would be using general fund revenues so that we would just reimburse general services of the general fund, that entire allocation, and we would be able to, use the general fund revenues for those projects. And by doing so, we wouldn't have to follow the Buy America, Build America, the extra, Davis-Bacon. We can just follow our normal procedures. And the other thing to that is, one of our biggest items that we're worried about is just a simple delay in getting materials.
So what you're talking about is not just the delay in time, the additional costs that go along with that.
Correct.
And the impacts of that.
Correct. So again, staff is definitely not asking to not do these projects. It's just.
No, it's
shift
dollars
the-
and efficiency. It's just doing the same thing, but another way of doing it.
So if y'all are okay with it, it would just simply be an add to the February 7th budget amendment, transferring the money from the project side to the general fund, reimbursing the expenditures, and then setting up the transfers from the general fund to the project funds for those projects to still move forward. We've discussed that at length with Zach and James Moore and Company, and if there's any questions other than what I can answer, Zach is definitely here specifically for this
I am
item.
all about efficiency and saving money.
Absolutely.
Anybody against it?
So
No,
John,
I'm not against it, but
Back up.
I just, legal, we're good. This is all something that can be done.
Yeah, I think, John, the expenditure that you're using the ARPA funds for would be what now? What's the new expenditure?
Well, the expenditure is the same. I just would be reimbursing the general fund for general services, which is allowed because we fall under the $10 million, and it's, I can use it for anything. The federal government has said anything under 10 million, we can use it for any general services. And then I would just be setting up the general fund to pay for those projects versus
And
ARPA.
then reimbursing, so there's no.
Nothing
additional-
changes on the
Okay.
project side,
Okay, I'm
just the
following you.
funding source.
It's another
Following.
example of the federal government trying to do
Yep.
something
Yep.
and not tightening all the loops as tight as they meant
Correct.
to.
And I can tell you, whether I speak
Bureaucracy
to
at its
James
finest.
or with Lynn back there from, Public Works, this is a prevalent direction of government's doing.
I'm going to ask a very direct question, and it's meant more for just record than anything. We're 100% sure if we do this that they're not going to come calling for this money back?
So,
I think that question's only fair to ask.
yes, because Zach was who recommended this.
Yeah, I'm not, and again, I'm not doubting this. I just want to make sure I ask this question. And Zach, it's
absolutely.
good to see you.
Give
I'm
it
sorry
to
about
us,
your
Zach.
Jaguars.
All
man.
right.
Give it to us.
But
Good evening.
good you got to go to the game, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Zach Shalafor, partner, James Moore and Company. So as John referenced, there's this whole concept of providing general services. I believe the agenda item referenced a standard allowance. Just to kind of take a step back and kind of, in terms of how this came about, give a little additional perspective. And kind of, for me, it's one where it was kind of deja vu the way the ARPA rules evolved. So if we go back now, 2.5 years ago when the CARES Act came out, the very start of COVID, nothing came to the city initially. The CARES Act was there. All the money basically flowed through to the states and to the counties. At one point after that funding came out, Volusia County did something that not many counties did, kind of in looking at after the fact. They earmarked, I believe it was $15 million of the 100 or so million of CARES Act funds for Volusia County to be passed through to the cities. So City of Port Orange had, I want to say, about a $2 million subrecipient agreement with Volusia County for CARES Act funds. Again, we're talking CARES Act, but it's going to be very similar in terms of the principles, how that evolved. So with the CARES Act funds, initially with the CARES Act, there was a very specific use. Most of it was for PPE, and I kind of joked with people that, we're talking $2 million, you can only buy so much hand sanitizer and everything else. So what we saw kind of overall and what the county saw with all the cities saying, hey, Volusia County, here's what's in the Port Orange budget, is nobody could spend all their money. The federal government saw this as well with the CARES Act dollars, and I remember one day reading an update, and there was this language in the Treasury's update saying that CARES Act funds could be used for public safety, payroll, and benefits, and just kind of said that any public safety expense was eligible, because initially it was above and beyond. So let's say you had an extra firefighter on call and you expanded your shifts during COVID because there were increased calls, things like that there was potentially a need for. That would be kind of an additional, due to COVID, excess service being provided that was eligible. This new guidance just said any first responder salaries is presumed to be in response to the pandemic. We refer to it as the public safety payroll presumption. So what happened there is Volusia County, their finance team reviewed this, agreed with that, and met with all the cities. And within about a week, I think every city amended their CARES Act subrecipient budget to just say, hey, we're reimbursing public safety payroll because $2 million is nothing relative to what your annual police and fire budgets were. Everybody submitted payroll documentation to the county, and immediately that, again, about $2 million, I believe, was paid out to the city. And at that point in time, there was no kind of incremental expense. That was $2 million that came in. You met the requirements to earn that from the county, but you didn't have to go spend above and beyond kind of a new $2 million. The Treasury said, hey, those existing expenses are deemed eligible. So it's kind of when I first saw it, it was like, this seems too good to be true. And it was kind of, I think, the Treasury's way of expediting those funds to be put to use. Kind of the way I look at it with first the CARES Act and now ARPA, is ARPA, you've got every government, municipalities, counties in the country receiving these funds. And from an oversight perspective, the way I look at it is, we've seen what it's like with FEMA. It takes years, and a hurricane comes through, you have probably 50 to 100 local governments that are impacted, have some sort of a FEMA claim. Well, ARPA is like every government in the country got hit by a hurricane. So if you think about it, it's kind of one to say, well, how in the world is the Treasury going to kind of monitor this and have that kind of steady set of eyes like they would have on FEMA and otherwise? So back about a year ago, as mentioned here, when the final rule was issued last January, they provided for an expansion of this criteria over revenue replacement was one of the eligible uses, and put in there what the feds call the standard allowance of $10 million that could be assumed in revenue replacement. There was a calculation to go through at first where you would calculate a kind of a real number of your lost revenue. But the feds came out and said anything under $10 million you can assume without having, or anything up to $10 million, you could assume without having to go through the calculations. Generally speaking, to me, that was kind of the Fed saying, hey, $10 million and below is considered de minimis relative to the federal budget, and they just wanted to kind of get those dollars out to be used without kind of being subject to all of the enhanced rules related to those funds. With regard to, so step one is to claim the standard allowance that says you're going to spend your funds under those rules. What that ultimately does, as John mentioned, with regard to kind of general revenues or general government services, is any ARPA funds spent under that standard allowance are subject to basically just to be spent for general government services, which pretty much is 99% of anything the city could ever spend money on. The feds gave many examples, kind of saying any public safety, capital projects, things like that. There were only 4 explicitly prohibited uses under this criteria. One was to offset a reduction in tax revenue. So you could not say, okay, we're going to decrease our ad valorem taxes by $9 million and replace it with the ARPA funds. They said that is not a permitted use. You can't make it to make an additional deposit to pension funds. So all the plans have been doing very well, but say we had a major hole like we did 10 years ago, you couldn't say we're going to put that $9 million and split it into all of the pension plans just to kind of make up ground. You could not use it for existing debt service payments or to replenish reserves, so it still kind of has to be spent. And then if there were any legal settlements, judgments, those were excluded as well. So what we've been doing is we've been working with about 50 some current clients, some that were not current clients, some even out of state, to kind of work through this process with, kind of taking a very similar approach to the CARES Act funding to say, okay, on paper, we need to identify expenses that those $9 million or almost $10 million will be earned from. So similar to the CARES Act where police and fire payroll expenses were provided to meet the restriction on paper, that same approach is kind of what we've been recommending and looking at, is to say that we have existing expenses where there's no complex procurement rules or anything else like that that have to be followed. And those can be used to, on paper, meet the restrictions of the ARPA funds so that the city basically has earned those dollars free and clear. So that's kind of step one on paper to meet the compliance requirements, earn the funds. But we don't want to stop there where you would just say, hey, the money's ours, we're just going to put it down into reserves and not really do much beyond that. Is you still want to have the accountability and the transparency over the use of those dollars. So really what happens is you kind of earn this $9 million, or again, $10 million. We already have the cash, but then you still track it in a separate fund or otherwise relative to those projects to say, okay, here's what we're spending those funds on to put those dollars to work for the city of Port Orange. Just that's not the way that it has to get reported and flow through with the federal government, because as John mentioned, if those were direct expenses of the ARPA funds, there would be additional rules related to procurement, things like that, that would have to be followed. So it really, at the end of the day, the result is the same, except that it helps minimize the cost of compliance, as well as potentially the cost of the projects, because you're not subjecting the city to those same requirements that really only have to apply to those.
Thank you, Zach.
That received.
So the answer to your question is yes.
That was the most astounding
yes.
yes I've ever.
Just want to make sure we
I am,
left.
I am
That's a
astounded.
yes.
All right, wanted to leave no stone unturned. So.
Thorough.
So just like with CARES, we want to use it against the public safety because it's not questioned, because it's presumed it was related to something, related to COVID.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that item? There being none, as I watch Zach walk away from the podium ceremoniously, there is no other business come before us this evening. Before I drop the gavel, I just want to say happy birthday to my son Patrick.
Oh.
Birthday.
Happy birthday. Okay?